Welcome. Hello, everyone. Helito. My name is Shannon O'Loughlin. I am a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and I am your host for another episode of Red Hoop Talk, your native news and talk show, produced happily and graciously by the Association on American Indian Affairs, the oldest nonprofit serving Indian country since 1922. Did you know that next year, in 2022, we will be 100 freaking years old? Yes, and I'm feeling it. My hair is going gray. What do y'all think of my hair right now? It's shorter than last time, I think. Happy to hear your comments about my hair or anything else on the comment stream, which is coming to all of us through Facebook, through YouTube, and through Twitter. So please let's hear from you, who you are, where you're coming from, whose homelands you are on tonight. Helito, War and Peace. Nice name, War and Peace. Wait, we've got to bring that up. Your actual name is Warren Peace? That's awesome. And your mother was a clever woman there, Warren Peace. We're on our 71st episode. Tonight, we are going to bring you a wonderful discussion with Talia Boyd, who's from the Diné Nation, and she's a cultural landscapes manager at the Grand Canyon Trust. She's going to be visiting with us later about what it means to stay close to culture and where she comes from. And of course, her important work at the Grand Canyon Trust protecting sacred places. But let's do a little bit of a news, shall we? What's going on currently since last time we saw you? We know that I think it was today or yesterday that Chuck Sams III, who's Cayuse and Walla Walla, was sworn in as the first ever Native American director of the National Park Service. Yay, Chuck. We're so glad to have you there in the government, helping to support, hopefully, better relations between tribes and the National Park Service and protecting our cultural heritage places. Deb Holland, who is our Secretary of the Interior, swore him in as the first tribal citizen to serve that agency. And President Biden, hate to give you all this political news, but President Biden also nominated as a judge to the U.S. District Court, Miss Sunshine Suzanne Sykes, who's also Navajo. And we hope that she gets seated in the district court. We need more and more natives in federal court because there are so many federal Indian law cases that come to the courts, and so many people who do not get federal Indian law cases whatsoever. So let me tell you this story. This was back in 1999 when I was a wee little pup, and I had an internship with the UDAL interns in Washington, D.C., my first ever time in Washington, D.C., and we had an audience. We were the audience with Sandra Day O'Connor, who was an appointed Supreme Court justice at the time from Arizona. And one of the Native students with me asked her, what's it like to work on federal Indian law cases and Native American issues? And she looked at this group of Native American graduate and undergraduate students and said, we don't like to work on federal Indian law cases. We don't understand them, and we don't like to do them. And so you can imagine how we all must have felt in that room to hear that from someone who's a freaking Supreme Court justice, telling us that they didn't know how to work on these cases very well and that they didn't like them. So we need all the Indians we can get in the courts so that we can have a better educated judiciary when it comes to our cases, which are, in the Supreme Court more than many other uh, uh, of those types of subject matter cases. So good stuff. Another good stuff, but let me give you trauma trigger warning here. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, let me share this site. If I remember how to do this, since the last time I did a show, we are going to share that screen. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs just developed and released their missing and murdered Indigenous people website. I'm going to copy and paste the website address in the comments so that you can have that. But trigger warning, because if you scroll down, it allows you to view missing or murdered open cases. And I'm not going to take you to those cases, but I know when I looked at them and saw these men and women who have been missing or maybe murdered, and that they're on this list and have been targeted by many people who are trafficking or who are committing racially motivated acts. It really it does more than break your heart. It really unsettles something deep in who we are, and in that sense of identity that people would target Native people, our relatives, for trafficking and to commit violence on them. So when you're going and checking out the new website, just be warned that that's difficult to see those individuals, but necessary, so we can hopefully solve those cases and bring those people home and the perpetrators to justice. So, how's everyone else doing? COVID numbers are going up, and we're seeing increases in hospital stays on res and off. I hope everyone is keeping safe and has their mask and have got their boosters, shots, and all of that jazz. We need you to take care, not just for yourself, but for all of those that you interact with, elders and children alike. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday. This is going to be our last show for the year, and we'll come back in January. So before it sounds like I'm ending the show already. Before we go there, let's bring on our guest. I hope you all are ready. I want to introduce to you a wonderful woman who actually reached out to me some months ago to be a speaker about sacred places and about the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act on one of the Grand Canyon Trust's video podcasts that they were doing. And I just kind of fell in heavy like with Talia, Miss Talia Boyd, and really wanted her to come on Red Hoop Talk to share her wisdom and work with us. Talia, welcome, and thank you so much for being a part of our show today.
Oh, yeah, it is, Shannon. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here. I love Red Hoop Talk, and it's just an amazing space with Native perspectives. So
Well,
thank you.
thank you. And don't let me stop you. If you'd like to give you a traditional welcome, please do.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to do that. I do hail from the Diné Nation, so I will introduce myself traditionally. She'eya Talia Boyd and Chia, Torich Eatney and Shle, Tor Haglini, Bushes Chin, Ash Cheda Shache, do Tabaheda Chanela, Akut Adana Esa and Shle, Not Georgia Asia Hawan. Good morning or good evening, relatives. I am based in New Mexico. I'm originally from Arizona, but our Diné Nation homelands expand into all of the four corners. And so I recognize that all of that is my homelands as well. But again, yeah, very honored to be here. Thank you, Shannon, for bringing me on, and really excited to just share some of the work that I've been doing.
Oh, good. And I have to say I really like your necklace that's happening there. What can you tell us anything about that? That's really
Absolutely.
nice.
So this is a new piece that I wanted some new bling, and it's from Lejeune Chavez from Santo Domingo Pueblo, also known as Kiwa Pueblo here in New Mexico. Her and her husband have a really amazing line of jewelry. I believe they have a shop online, Santo Domingo Pueblo Jewelry.com. Giving a shout out to my Pueblo relatives. Yes, but she has some amazing beadwork. They do silver work, a ton of amazing jewelry. So check it out, folks. Yeah, this was a early Christmas present. So I'm really excited to just show it off. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad you did. Thank you for sharing and having all the information so everybody can get them some
Yeah.
um, online. So, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like, where you're coming from now, and I think you're in Navajo territory now. What was it like growing up at Navajo and still being able to be at home and working at home?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very privileged, to be born and raised on the res and to just have that res that res livelihood instilled in me at such a young age, and still being very close to the res, right? Like I live in a border town, Gallup, New Mexico, so I'm still very much close to home and within the four sacred mountains of Diné. So in that way I do feel very privileged, but I come from a long line of matriarchs who have been holding it down for generations, and I hope to carry on that power and just building that beauty within my own nation and within Native America in general. Um, but I grew up in a very rural town, small town on the res, middle of nowhere. But every day I had to get up at 6 a.m. and ride the bus to school, which was like an hour away. um, on my way to school, we had a little community where some of my friends lived, and we would pick them up too. But there was this huge uranium mill located in that community. It's also known as the Tuba City Disposal Site, or also Rare Metals, located in Arizona, right near Tuba City, Arizona. And so we would pick up my friends there every morning and go to school. And several years later, folks were being forced to relocate. They were being displaced. And a lot of people in that community were getting sick. And so they were forced to move out. There was a lot of contamination due to the mill. And, by then it was too late. A lot of people were already very ill, and a lot of folks had already died. But I didn't realize what that mill was until I became an adult. So after Arizona, we moved to New Mexico, to Church Rock, New Mexico, which, in case some of you don't know, is the home of the largest radioactive spill in U.S. history to this date. It occurred 3 months after 3 Mile Island, which a lot of folks are aware of. That 3 Mile Island incident occurred in Pennsylvania. And then 3 months later, again, we had the Church Rock spill of 1979, which is 12 miles from Gallup, from where I live right now. And there was over 94 million tons of radioactive sludge and waste released into the arroyos, which is like a little ditch. And it went into the Rio Puerco, which goes into the past the Arizona, New Mexico state line, and connects to the Little Colorado, which then connects to the bigger Colorado. It's a tributary. And that feeds into, giving water to communities like Phoenix and Tucson. And so this spill was massive. There wasn't a whole lot of national media coverage. To this day, our communities are still pleading for cumulative studies in the as far as air, soil, and water studies and health studies. Um, there's been minimal resources for our communities, as opposed to 3 Mile Island, which again was only 3 months prior, but they had a flood of resources coming in. It was predominantly a white community, so of course they had national media coverage. It's pretty well known, right? The Church Rock spill of 79 is not known. And so every chance I get, I bring that up. I let people, I like to put it on people's radars. It's important. It's a part of history, and it wasn't disclosed for a lot of reasons, but I think mostly because it was within tribal lands, right? It was within Navajo tribal trust land. And so it was kind of just swept under the rug. And those are the kinds of things that us Diné have lived with. We've been inundated with extractive industries, everything from uranium, coal, oil, and gas. And our water, our groundwater, which is what we mostly have, it has been compromised. And so there's a lot going on, within Diné Nation. And so we're really trying to shift away from that, right? Shift away from those extractive industries, shift away from all of these really this environmental degradation through these different institutions that have come through our communities. And so, it really looks like just having hard conversations on the ground with a lot of entities, including our own tribal leaders, right? And holding them accountable and demanding transparency on a lot of levels. But I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just going on a tangent right now. But yeah, born and raised on a little town in Arizona, moved to New Mexico. I'm still here. I went away for college for a while, but I really had a calling to come back home. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a while, and I had no sense of community, right? I tried to work on different issues within that community there, but it just didn't feel right. And so I came home because I knew my homelands were calling me, and they needed that protection, right? And so it took a lot of hard work and sacrifice to get here, really, to kind of lay down a path for myself to be an organizer, especially around nuclear issues, right? And uranium issues, because those are very heavy issues that are really, it's not for the lighthearted, to say the least.
And like you said, most of the public doesn't realize how hammered Navajo area has been with this shit. So what was it like for you growing up with all of this happening around you? What did that do to you, as far as what kind of person did that create?
Yeah, that's a really wonderful question. And I think, just as a Native person, I was angry as a younger person, right? I had a lot of resentment towards just the oppressive systems that I recognized even from an early age.
Yeah,
Right?
does anyone wonder, like, why do people ask us why we're pissed off? Like, why do people keep asking us this?
Yeah,
Just talk to
exactly.
Talia, talk to most of us. We're gonna tell you a story, what Talia is telling you now.
Yeah, there's deep trauma within Native America, just from the land loss, but just through so much, the genocide, the colonization. um we're mourning, our land. Our land is mourning us. A lot of us wear black, like me right now. I say that it's us mourning our land. A lot of natives wear black, and maybe that's a subconscious thing, but we do, right? And we look good in black. But yeah, I say that, but it's a lot, right? This is something that we carry within ourselves, is this multi-generational trauma, and really, calling on ourselves to heal for our next generations. That in itself, I think, is a huge sacrifice that a lot of folks are recognizing right now, right? But on top of the land loss, we're being re-traumatized too with, God, I just saw the comment about residential schools, the mass graveyards of our children's and our ancestors, right? So, these kinds of things are constantly, coming up within Native America. All of these issues are constantly being thrown on the table over and over again, and it's re-traumatizing for a lot of folks. But we don't talk about it, and I think we really need to create space to really just have more space for those conversations to heal. It's a lot, right? It's a lot of just trying to hold others accountable, but to also hold yourself accountable to your own healing at the same time, because I think we all have a a responsibility as Native peoples to our next generations, to those unborn who are not here yet, right? That goes back into our ancestral teachings that have been taught through our worldviews, our cosmologies, our languages, and our ceremonies, right? These are the teachings that our ancestors died and prayed for, right? And so it really is our responsibility to carry those on. And as a mom, I recognize that too. And just having that passion internally and really trying to just do the work and do it in a good way where I know I can look back later in the future and know that I tried, right? And I was there, and that this was an important time in history where a lot was going on. But at least our children know that we stepped up, right? We stepped into that space and we stepped into our bravery. And we spoke up just like our ancestors did before.
So, what did you always feel this passionate, or were you some goth kid who was just lashing out back in the day? Did you come to a point where you made a decision to be productive with your anger? Right? I mean, that's kind of my story. I was just freaking angry.
Yeah.
Um, and it came to a point of realization of like, how can I save the world? It's not going to be through my anger, right?
Right.
How did were you angry and realized, or are you still the rebel? What are you?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lot of both, right? I think
Yeah.
my healing journey, I know, it's a lifelong journey, right? And I was a little punk rock girl. I used to skateboard. I love the metal. I was that little rebel girl. And I still feel her sometimes. But yeah, I had to let go of that anger. And I think that goes back to just recognizing within your own healing journey what forgiveness, how much of an impact forgiveness makes within your own healing, right? And understanding just the sacrifices that others have made for you, also within your own healing journey and within their own healing journeys, right? Because nobody's perfect, we're all human. So I really had to let go of a lot of that anger. It took a while. I was angry probably, throughout my 20s and probably some of my 30s. But then after becoming a mom, I think that really too put things into perspective for me, right? Like just shifting that mentality, and really knowing that I can't hold this anger in because it's just going to hold me down, right? And I think that's what a lot of us, yeah, especially as young Native peoples, we struggle with that, right? We struggle with trying to let go of that anger and forgive, because again, there's so many things that pop up continuously through our growth, through our lives, that kind of bring up that anger again. But it really goes back to, for me, it was for ceremony, right? Going to ceremony, spending time on the land, giving myself back to the land, I think is really what helped me heal in that sense of really letting go of that anger and knowing that love is what is really is what moves the dial when it comes to wanting to make change, right? And the anger really isn't gonna get you anywhere. So I had to forgive a lot of people, and I had to forgive myself, and forgive a lot of the ugly atrocities, that had happened, to me, to my family, to even my ancestors, right? So having to dig really deep. And again, I think it's a lifelong journey. I'm not fully healed. I don't think I'll ever be fully healed. This trauma is heavy, and our kids feel it even now, right? So yeah, I think it's an ongoing journey. And it's something I don't take lightly, right? It's something that, it's a constant, a daily thing where I have to recognize, um, my own mindfulness when it comes to, being open-minded and open-hearted,
Yeah.
and really allowing myself to grow, in different spaces, especially when I'm being challenged.
I know that's the worst, isn't
Yeah.
it? Especially from someone who should know better. So you went to University of New Mexico.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in a what field did you go in? Uh,
Yeah, well, I was going I wanted to go to school for nursing, and then, I kind of shifted back and forth for a while, and then I wanted to go into communications. So, I'm actually a college dropout.
all right.
Yeah, so, there goes that rebel side. But again, I think this kind of resonates too with a lot of natives, right? Like a lot of us don't, that institution, that higher institutional school system is just, it's not attractive in a lot of
Yeah.
ways,
Yeah.
because you do feel displaced, because you do deal with racism, because you have to navigate all of these systems that are very unfamiliar, right? And having to put yourself in unfamiliar spaces, it's very uncomfortable. And I was like this little res girl, no idea. None of my family had gone to college, nobody had graduated college. I think that's something, again, too, that resonates with a lot of our tribal folks, because especially if we were born and raised on the res, you just, that's all you see. And so you really have to push yourself outside of your comfort zones to really kind of get out there, right? And I did, I got my associate's degree. I almost finished my bachelor's. I'm going back to school, but I don't like, the academia world is, it's in its own way a little bit elitist to me, right? I have a lot of very smart, brilliant friends who have very fancy credentials at the end of their names, and they're very, very great. But at the same time, there is some kind of like elitist mentality and space in the academia realm that I've noticed, which I think also, a lot of people notice that, and they don't, it's unattractive, I think, to some. But anyway, that just goes back to academia. For me, I think going back to that rebel thing, I considered just saying, F that. I'm just going to move back to the res and become an apprentice for a traditional medicine person and learn my traditional knowledge systems. And instead of trying to get a PhD or whatnot, right? I'm
Yeah.
just going to go back to my elders and have them school me in what traditional knowledge is. Because, I had to sit back and kind of look at it like, what's, I think Western knowledge is a little overrated, honestly. I think our traditional knowledge systems exceed it in so many ways, but it's not recognized, right? And our
Mhm.
traditional knowledge systems are regenerative systems that have been in place for thousands of years. So you can't compare the two, honestly. I mean, this is knowledge that has been instilled, God, for through families, through oral history, through lived experience, and through observation of living with the land. And so it's a really beautiful way of knowledge, and it's very complex and very sophisticated, and it's very underappreciated and unrecognized within that Western, especially within Western academia,
Yep.
which is where I think I also have a big qualm, right? Because it doesn't recognize traditional knowledge systems or the sophistication of indigenous science or indigenous knowledge. So yeah, that was kind of my other side of it, is like, well, I'm just going to move back to the res, find a traditional knowledge person I could become an apprentice to, and really soak that in and absorb that knowledge in that way, as opposed to, going back to the university
Yeah.
and finishing those degrees.
That is so interesting
Yeah.
that you're talking about that, because we've been having at the association, we've been having discussions about our scholarship program. We are the oldest legacy scholarship program out there. We've been giving scholarships since 1947, and I think the first person was a Navajo woman. Um, and we're like, how is this helping to generate our vision of creating a world where Native American values and cultures are lived, protected, and respected? It's like, how do we set up scholarships so we can support elders and culture keepers and their students to
Mhm.
continue those ways? because you know, there's nothing out there that's really helping to support that, except just because, you know, it happens and it's always done. Well, how can we help support that? And we
Yeah.
were thinking about trying to make our scholarships into a, a traditional scholarship, whatever. I wouldn't even know what to call it, but to help support work of elders and culture keepers versus academic institutions continuing to make money and make money off of us, make money off of our bodies, off of our research, off of having that token Native Studies program. Not to downplay any of my friends who are academics and who are working the system,
Yeah.
but it seems like, you know, what the education you got, I mean, so many of us academics are jealous of, because that's what we really hoped we could find, but in some of our tribes, it just doesn't exist in the same way anymore.
Mhm.
So you did that. So you screw school, you got traditional education, and where did you go from there, or what happened? I'm sure that education's not done with yet. I'm sure you're still.
Yeah, yeah. It's an ongoing thing. You know,
Yeah.
I am going back to school and finishing. But you
Right,
know,
we won't totally downplay, okay, that's good.
but no, I love your idea of decolonizing
Yeah.
your scholarships, and like that needs to happen across the board, right? But yeah, that's a whole another conversation too. It's just like decolonizing and dismantling all of these, again, these oppressive systems, right? And that goes into like the NGO world and the nonprofit world too, and how their funding is very gross as well, right? And that also needs to be colonized, because some of the metrics that they throw out are very, you know, just transactional, and they're not very transformational for any of the communities. And so, you know, that needs to be called out. That needs to be a part of the dialogue as well, right? Is really, what is decolonization? It really is like dismantling those oppressive systems and finding other ways of knowing and understanding how to, you know, connect with our fellow humans, or just our relatives in general, right? But yeah, I really appreciate that, and I think that's a part of the bigger work too, is just the decolonizing across the board, and that's a responsibility, I think, for all of us as well, right? Is
Right.
really taking that on and trying to plant those seeds wherever we can, and having those conversations with, you know, for me, it really started with my family too, like, you know, organizing, it starts from the home, right? You start organizing with your family, and like they're kind of your guinea pigs. And then you kind of expand out into your community, and then on, right? It's really a beautiful thing, and it's kind of a ripple effect. But
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Shannon, I kind of
No.
veered off again,
No,
but
no, no, you're never veering off there, Talia. Keep going. But I do want us to talk about your work at Grand Canyon Trust, and just it's hard for me to even conceptualize what it must be like to have all those extractive industries in your homelands, destroying places that hold sanctity and sacredness. I can't imagine what it's like to look at the outside world and say, this is how they treat us. This is what they think of us. This is how they treat us. Like, I just can't imagine what that's like. So I know a lot of the work you do, you want to focus on the youth, and can you talk a little bit about how you got into Grand Canyon Trust, and the organizing you're doing?
Sure. I've been with the trust for a few years now, maybe 3 or 4 years. And most of my work has been around Bears Ears National Monument and Grand Staircase. And both monuments have been restored. Yay. That's what we've been working on over the past 3 years. And so to have this into fruition is just, it's just amazing, and it's beautiful. It's a lot of on the ground organizing from a lot of amazing Native peoples and allies who were just pushing on this for years. And so, it's just been tremendous. And again, I feel very privileged to be able to work on these issues. Alongside that, working on the White Mesa Mill. The White Mesa Mill is the last operating conventional uranium mill in the country. It was originally designed to run for 15 years, and then it was supposed to be closed and cleaned up. But the mill is still in operation 40 years later. And the community of White Mesa, the Ute Mountain Ute community of White Mesa, they have deep concerns, of course, about their public health, contamination of the land, air, and the water, and of course, the desecration of their cultural and sacred spaces. And it's right in the front door of the Bears Ears National Monument as well. And of course, there's a lot of issues that go into that mill, the transportation routes where there have been accidents in the past. A lot of those routes go through rural communities, tribal communities, which of course aren't prepared for any kind of radioactive catastrophe if it should happen. So there's a lot of really deep concerns. This mill also is located right on top of the Navajo Aquifer, which is an aquifer for not just Navajo, but for all of our surrounding tribal relatives, such as the Ute Mountain Ute as well. And so this is one of the bigger issues that we've been working on. Again, over the past several years, they have a ton of different waste streams that they bring in from across the country to this one facility. Again, it's the last operating conventional uranium mill in the United States. So now they are proposing on bringing in waste from outside of the United States, for instance, from Japan, and also from the Baltic nation of Estonia and Europe. And so they're bringing in all this waste from those outside facilities as well. There's also been waste from the Midnight Mine, which is on Spokane Res, and they've been shipping that down to the White Mesa Mill. There was also a facility in Gore, Oklahoma called the Sequoia Fuels Corporation, and that was on Cherokee tribal lands. And they also shipped a ton of radioactive raffinite sludge, is what they call it, to the White Mesa Mill. Highly toxic, highly radioactive. And what they do there is they call it recycling, but basically they bring all this waste there and they extract less than 1% of whatever uranium they can from that waste. And whatever remaining waste is left, they store on site in their storage ponds or their tailings ponds. And that's where it stays in perpetuity, basically forever. And so some of the issues there too is that some of those tailings have not been covered properly. And so, there's exposure of radon and sulfur dioxide and other toxic chemicals that come off of the facility. And the White Mesa Ute community is located only 4 miles from this facility. And so, the potential of them getting contaminated is very high. And they do have the community gets headaches when they go outside. So oftentimes the kids won't go outside because they get sick, they get headaches, and so they stay inside most of the time. Every year we have an annual protest walk, which we help organize with the community to raise awareness. Yes, 2 years ago we had a national town hall. We worked with a lot of really great organizations, including the Indigenous Environmental Network, and some other really, Utah Diné Nation, the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition. Some really great organizations came together to work on that issue as well. But recently, the EPA did put a halt on any more waste being brought to the facility because they did a flyover. There was a recent article in High Country News about it. They did a flyover over the mill and noticed that it wasn't properly covered. And so that's when EPA, of course, decided to come and do something, which is the first time they've done something like that. There's so many nuances and history within the White Mesa Mill. One of the big things here too is that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission doesn't regulate the White Mesa Mill. The state of Utah, the Utah Division of Radioactive Waste and Waste Management, is actually the entity that regulates the White Mesa Mill. And how that happened was through an agreement state that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has It's an agreement state program, and the state of Utah applied for it and they got approved. And so now they're able to regulate all the radioactive waste that's coming into the facility. And so they kind of just left the door open for a lot of these companies to come and bring their waste in. So it's, again, our Ute Mountain Ute relatives have been inundated by all of these different waste streams. And they want it closed. They want the White Mesa Mill closed. They want cleanup. And there, again, there's a lot of additional nuances. So for Navajo Nation, I mentioned earlier that we've also been inundated with uranium mining. That's complements of the Cold War. And when the U.S. and Russia were, the Soviet Union were rushing to see who could build the biggest bombs, they found that uranium was very rich within the Colorado Plateau. And so we have over 500 abandoned uranium mines on Navajo Nation alone.
Jeez.
And that's not individual mines. That's more like clusters of mines. So it looks a little bit more like over 1,000 abandoned uranium mines on Navajo Nation. The Church Rock community, which I mentioned earlier, where this spill happened, that's the #1 Superfund site on Navajo Nation. So on Navajo Nation, we have 4 hotspots, one near Flagstaff, near the Gray Mountain Cameron area. We also have a hotspot near Monument Valley, one of our very beautiful landscapes within Navajo lands. We also have a hotspot near Shiprock and Monument Valley area. And then, of course, here in Church Rock and Gallup area. So again, Gallup is the #1 Superfund site, and a Superfund site is basically an area that has been designated highly contaminated and is a high priority on the EPA list for cleanup. And so that's what the Church Rock site is right now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they're proposing on shipping. They don't know where to take this waste from Navajo land, right? We want it off our homelands. We've been dealing with it for over 50 years. And so we want it off. And now they're proposing, they have nowhere to take this stuff, basically. There is nowhere in the world to store high-level radioactive waste. This is a problem worldwide. This is why nuclear is a ridiculous option. It's not green. It's not clean. We have to talk about the whole nuclear fuel chain, from the mining, the milling, to the transportation, to the reactors. After it's done at the reactors, they try to ship that waste back to the Western states where they can bury it back where they mined it, basically, right? And right now in New Mexico, where I am, they're proposing the Holtec site in southern New Mexico. We have the WIP site here, the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, which is also in southern New Mexico. So here in New Mexico, a lot of us, we say it's a sacrifice state because we have seen almost all steps of the nuclear fuel chain, everything from the mining, the milling. We have LANL, the Los Alamos National Labs. We have Sandia Labs. They all have, I think, what they call education reactors. So we do have small reactors here in New Mexico at the labs. And again, we have those repositories in southern New Mexico. So that is basically, a lot of the whole nuclear fuel chain. This is, they're proposing on taking that waste from Navajo to the White Mesa Mill, because again, it's the only operating conventional uranium mill in the country. And this is a huge concern for not only the Ute Mountain Ute, but also for Navajo, right? For Diné, especially for us who work on these issues, who know that this facility sits right on top of the Navajo aquifer. And if it should be compromised, well, then that's detrimental to all of us, right? Mm-hmm. And so we know that that's not a good option either. And we absolutely don't want to shift the waste and the burden and that brunt to another tribal community, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening. These companies basically pit our communities against each other by transporting this waste back and forth. And really us unknowingly just, it's happening all the time. And it's just crazy how often it's going on. Even here in Gallup, I jump on the freeway sometimes to go up towards Utah. And on that route, I see a ton of radioactive trucks carrying radioactive material, traveling constantly back and forth on that route. And it goes through Navajo communities. It goes through a lot of rural communities. So there's still deep concerns about a lot of this exposure. There's different pathways of exposure. I could go on and on about some of the horror stories I've heard of families being exposed to a lot of this contamination. And so it's really infuriating, right? And it really does just it spurs some kind of fire within you to really want to do something. But I also want to highlight real quickly too. I mentioned that oil and gas is also another extractive industry out here, but that also has great potential for digging up radioactive material as well, right? Through their fracking process, they're extracting, pushing out a lot of natural bearing uranium. So it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's everywhere.
There's a question from JD. JD's one of our regular listeners here. He's asking or saying, it's my understanding that some radioactive material from fracking is being shipped around. Are you aware of this?
Yeah, like I just said, there's a lot of that material that gets pushed into that fracking material when they're extracting it. So there is radioactive contaminants within that fracking material, but they don't talk about it, right? And they're not they're not about to let the rest of the world know. But within Chaco Canyon, which is one of the very sacred spaces, landscapes to not only Navajo but to our Pueblo relatives too. That's where they've been proposing a lot of those oil and gas wells. And then there's another space of land between Bears Ears and Cedar Mesa, and it doesn't have a name specifically, but we've been calling it the lands between. And there were a lot of proposals for oil and gas wells there as well. So it's another space that has a ton of sacred landscapes and cultural landscapes, which we know, it needs to be protected. So that's a part of the additional work. These so-called public lands, they're ancestral lands to us, our traditional territories. And in those public lands, there's a lot of looting and vandalism. And of course, the stealing of even our ancestors and putting them into institutions across the country and across the world, and then auctioning them off in Europe and whatnot. So these are very detrimental to our communities, right? But not just to our communities, it's also detrimental to the people who are taking these items, because those items are powerful, and if it's not within the right hands, it could do bad things to that person, right? And so that is also something that folks need to take heed of when we're talking about these kinds of things, because these items are very, very sacred and they belong here in our homelands. There's a lot of ATVs that go through those spaces as well and really destruct a lot of the sacred landscapes. The pinyon and juniper in our homelands is really being impacted by the drought, and also some of the land management that's been occurring from federal entities doing removal of pinyon and juniper within some of those public lands and really destroying it. And so there's just so many issues that go into that, and we've been really trying to amplify and work with communities to talk about those issues and plant seeds, but also find solutions, right? What does it look like when tribal communities are empowered to really step into those spaces, right, and change those narratives for themselves? It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. How do we get from here to a world where it requires the people's consent? If you're going to come into our place and make us sick, you're going to have to ask us first, at least. We should have the right to say no and be able to keep you out, right? Any other, rich community, white community, non-native community, would be upfront in the news and get all sorts of attention if a particular type of such a destructive industry would move into their neighborhood. Um, how do we get from where we are now to where we want to go? Like, what is that going to take?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, it just seems so like these are issues that I've heard about since I was, you know, first learning about all of these when I was young. How do we how do we make this any better?
Yeah, I think, us Native peoples are really that solution to a lot of things these days, even including the climate crisis, right? And that comes through our traditional knowledge systems. We know how to live with the natural world. We've been in relationship with the natural world since the beginning of time, right? We know how to, we recognize the regenerative relationships. And we have prayers, offerings, and ceremonies, and languages, right? Our land doesn't speak English. I always say that, and I've heard it from others too. That we have over 574 tribes here, and our land requires indigenous languages and love. This is how that balance is recreated. This is how in Navajo, what we call huizhua, which is that balance and that harmony, within the natural world and within ourselves. Because as Native peoples, we know that whatever happens to the land will happen to us. We know the land is our family, the land is our relative, and we recognize that. And these conservationists and all these white people that I work with on and on, they don't get it. And it's really that linear thinking that they have, right? It's very linear, and that's Western lens. And indigenous thinking is very nonlinear, right? And we connect to our land in different ways. We connect to different things. We connect the dots in different ways. And so that needs to be recognized as well, right? Um, but I think for the dial to move forward, the world needs to recognize indigenous traditional knowledge systems, indigenous love. That's what's going to restore that balance within our natural world. I think this is, again, something that will help bridge that healing for both humanity and the natural world. And only Native peoples can do that. Only indigenous peoples can do that, right? Because we still have those knowledge systems in place. Um, Even through genocide and colonization, a lot of us have invested in our traditional knowledge systems. That's what has upheld us through all of that. And that's why we're still here today, right? And so we have to continue to invest in our traditional knowledge systems. We have to continue to invest in our languages. And that's really what is going to help to restore that balance within the natural world. So that really requires Native peoples to really step into our own leadership too, right? To step into those uncomfortable spaces, to have those hard, uncomfortable conversations with non-Native peoples, and really letting them know, like, we know what we're doing. We've always known what we're doing, and we're here to do it. We're here to do it right, and we're here to help. We're open. We want to share, but at the same time, there's only so much we can share, right? Because again, the Creator gave us responsibilities as Indigenous peoples to hold that knowledge, to be protectors of that knowledge, and to make sure that it lives on. And we recognize that, and so we know that that's ours to carry. And so I think we need to step back into that kind of thinking, into our Indigenous thinking, and really start challenging and calling out white supremacy for what it is, right? The ugly truth about all of it. And really putting ourselves in those spaces proudly, and letting people know, this is Native land. You're on Native land, and we're not going anywhere. We're here to stay. We're always going to be here, and our land will always recognize us, right? I think that's the only way we're going to move forward. And it's really beautiful because a lot of our relatives are walking that path, right? And our Auntie Deb is doing it now. Secretary Holland, you know, um, like you mentioned, Chuck Sams is also stepping into that space as well. We have some really incredible Native leaders and visionaries who are really stepping into these spaces in beautiful ways and really speaking that truth and really letting people know that us Native peoples are here and that we're here to help make that change. And that, you know, again, we're ready to lead. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
But really empowering our young people too, and making that space for them and mentoring them, I think, is a huge thing, right? Mentoring our young people, especially in these crazy ass times that we're in with this pandemic. You know, a lot of our young people carry so much, and I'm really proud of just the humility that I've seen from some young people, and just the conscientiousness that some of them carry, right? And really being just very aware and mindful of the burden that they're going to have to carry, right, as they are growing and becoming adults. But yeah, we do have a responsibility to our children to heal and to be those good mentors and leaders for them, right? So that they know that that they have that power within themselves.
Hey, do you want me to show this video or one of these videos?
Yeah, that would be
Um,
great.
Either about, do you want the little short one about White Mesa or the half-life?
Um, let's do the short one.
Okay. And we'll share the link for the other one for everyone.
Yeah, it's a really good
So
one,
let
guys.
me pull this up. Make sure I'm pulling audio. All right, let me play this.
I just want you guys to know this is what us White Mesa people what we're going through. This is why we're trying to stop this mill, is for better water, better air quality.
This is what we're fighting. We're fighting $1 million industry. And we are the only fully operated uranium mill throughout this whole country.
The important thing is we're really worrying about is the water.
You have to be proactive. To be proactive in what you want in this land. This is where you guys live. This is where your ancestors live. They're looking upon you guys up today.
That's the reason why we all get together to stop this up here. We've been inhaling the smoke and the wind kept going towards to our reservation. And you people landed don't even care about us, you people. So here I am, I'm raising my voice.
Go Grandma.
Yeah, Thelma Whiskers. Yeah, she is powerful. She is one of the powerful matriarchs in White Mesa. Her family is the family that has been very active in confronting the White Mesa mill. So she's tremendous. She has so much power. I just love Thelma and her daughter Yolanda Badback, her son Michael Badback. They are amazing people who have been doing the work for a long time. You know, those unsung heroes that you don't hear about. That's them, and you know they've been confronting that mill head on. So it's amazing. It's amazing to see them.
So what are we going to see in 2022? Do you think any more new stuff is coming out of the Biden administration? And what new is coming forward from Talia Boyd in 2022?
Yeah. Oh goodness. All things. As far as the Biden administration, I hope we can just continue to push on him to be accountable and be transparent. You know, he made a lot of big promises to to Native America, and to our Black and Brown relatives too, right, across the country, and really highlighting environmental justice, highlighting tribal consultation with Native nations. These are some of the big promises that he's made to us. But I'm hoping that we can keep the fire under him and continue to push on him to be held accountable, because Native America, we came out, man. We went to the polls. We got him in there. AZ, Four Corners. My homelands, man. We stepped up. We really pushed on Arizona to turn blue, and that was amazing. That was incredible. So I think we have power. We definitely have indigenous power, and it's growing. We're recognizing it, and I think moving forward, I think we can just continue to build on that momentum, empower our young people, guide them, help them to understand these systems and how to decolonize, right? How to really decolonize all of these things. It's not easy, and our young people need us to help, need us in that guidance. It's a lot to wrap your head around. As far as me and some of the work, I have a lot of things up my sleeves. A lot of really great ideas that I'm working on right now. Some projects that I want to get off the ground next year. I'm working on pulling together a tribal mentorship program. So I want to connect elders and younger generations from across the plateau to really start doing that transmission of traditional knowledge, giving them space, resources, and support to get back out onto the land, to reconnect with who we are as Native peoples. But really, again, just providing support for a lot of our people who are doing really great, amazing work within the plateau, and continuing to hold federal land managers accountable too, and trying to bolster tribal engagement when it comes to land management, right? Collaborative land management, especially around the Bears Ears, right? Supporting all of the amazing organizations who are doing that heavy lifting, the 5 tribes who are doing the heavy lifting there. So continuing to support all of our partners and the tribes within that work. And then, of course, elevating just the Native voice within public lands, within the plateau in general, right? And expanding out, I hope, again, outside of that. But like you mentioned in the beginning, I did organize some teaching series, virtual teaching series, Native perspectives on tribal consultation. I did that this past year. So I might do something along those lines again next year. It was really nice just to have a panelist of from all across Native Indian country to come and talk about all these amazing issues, yourself included, Shannon. You really unpacked a lot of that technical information for us when it came to NAGPRA, right? And a lot of some of those big, heavy laws and policies that we have to tackle when we talk about land management and land use, and protecting our sacred homelands. But I'm hoping that can continue, and I'm just really looking forward to getting back out onto the res too. I'm trying to work on building my home, and also trying to get back into weaving. I kind of started, and now I'm like, I really want to just do it. I come from an amazing line of weavers, so I'm like, if I can get this skill honed in and get it down, then I think that could be something for me to just do.
I think you better. Let's all encourage Talia to get back to weaving. Yes, please.
Yeah, very
good. What about skateboarding? No skateboarding?
Oh man, I like to say I can still skateboard, but I don't. I think I'm too old now. My son has a skateboard. I'm trying to teach him how to ollie. I can still ollie. I can still do 180. I can still almost do a kickflip. I don't know if I try hard enough, I think I can do it. But yeah, I think skateboarding is kind of like riding a bike. Once you kind of get it down, you kind of know. But one of my favorite things to do too in high school was just to bomb hills. Get on a skateboard and bomb those hills, and that's super for fun. But I don't think I can do that anymore.
Weaving.
It's all weaving now. Yeah, I gotta shift.
Oh man. Well, it's been really awesome talking to you, Talia. I I want to know. I'm going to be watching Grand Canyon Trust in 2022 and see what's happening there. And of course, if the association can ever be of any support or a partner in good crime,
Yeah,
then please let us know how we can help.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Shannon. Yeah, and I would absolutely love to partner in something in the future. So
good. Well,
let's chat.
Yes, I invite everyone to please go check out Talia. She's on the bio about us page on Grand Canyon Trust. Learn more about what the Grand Canyon Trust is doing, and get involved in getting rid of these extractive industries. Whatever you can do to educate your communities about the destruction of these. They're freaking all over the place. And what do you think, Talia, real quick, about the lithium mining in Nevada?
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know a whole lot, honestly, but I do know it's bad, right? And I know that our Shoshone relatives are being impacted tremendously by it. And it kind of goes back to the bombing, right, that occurred in the Nevada test sites. So those communities have been tremendously impacted too. So it really is re-traumatizing with this, a new form of mining of lithium, which is very, of course, toxic and dangerous to the community. So, I stand in solidarity and I support them. I think we should all try to, build that visibility around what's going on there and help amplify our relatives' voices in that part of the country. Those are their traditional homelands. I know Yucca Mountain, I'm kind of veering off into the Nevada test sites, but that's a sacred mountain to Western Shoshone, and I know that has been impacted tremendously. And where that lithium mine is too, it's right on top of a sacred landscape, I think, from what I remember hearing. So it is very impacting, and it's displacing a lot of tribal peoples, and who also need access to that space, right, for ceremony and prayer and to just gather medicine. Same with Navajo too, right? Like, we're still being proposed with new uranium mining on one of our sacred mountains, Mount Taylor, which is located near Grants, New Mexico, which at one point was called the uranium mining capital of the world. But we have two big Superfund sites on both sides of our mountain. One is in Laguna Pueblo, north of Laguna Pueblo, called the Homestake, not the Homestake mine, I'm sorry, the Jack Pile mine. And then on the other side of the mountain is the Homestake mine. So those are two big Superfund sites on each side of the mountain. And then they're proposing new uranium mining on the back of our mountain at the base of the mountain. So a few years ago, we had to fight to get it designated as a traditional cultural property. And that was as a result of Navajo and Pueblos, and I think some of our Apache relatives coming together and really asking it to be designated a cultural property, because it's sacred to over, I think, 20 tribes in both New Mexico and in Arizona. But I think the same thing is going on here with that lithium mine. It really is displacing our relatives to access their sacred space, but also contaminating them with a lot of that pollution that's coming from there. And that's going to be there probably in perpetuity too, once they extract it, right? So yeah, definitely sending love and prayers to our relatives there, and just really encourage everybody to try to shine light on what's happening there as well. It's important. And I think, this is some of the smaller tribes, who don't get a lot of visibility. I think it's important for us to be super supportive and helping to share their stories as well, right? And sharing what's happening in their homelands. there's a lot within Indian country that, people don't talk about, especially when it comes to some of the smaller tribal communities. So I oftentimes, it's important for us to just keep that in mind and to recognize that some of the smaller tribes, need that as well. And we need to amplify those stories and have it as a part of the dialogue, and just building that solidarity amongst our tribal nations.
Yeah, absolutely. And supporting and protecting one another.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Talia. And I'll let you get, I know you have family coming, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, winter season, and New Year. And looking forward to catching up with you next year.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Woo. Well, we have another episode in the books, and JD, let me just commiserate with you a little bit. Wow, of the world, that is scary. These issues to me have always just been overwhelming, and when you've been dealing with law and policy and how these things happen, how these mines can happen through permitting and government permissiveness, and the idea that we've got to get jobs, we've got to get energy, and we don't seem to have any creative thinking about what else we could do differently. Like, what could we do differently to have healthy societies and communities? Have we ever thought of any alternatives to extractive industries? Solar, wind, other things, of course, but how we get around in this world. Like, do we need all these cars? Do we need all these plastics? Do we need all of these things? And these are the questions that we're leaving for those in our younger generations to figure out, unfortunately, because we haven't been creative enough to build alternative solutions to our world. So I hope that young people will start asking those really hard questions. Well, how do we do all of this differently? And in a global society. I'm getting way over my head. I don't want to talk about this shit. What I do want to talk about is thanking you for joining us on another episode of Red Hoop Talk. Please go check out Grand Canyon Trust and check out, see if I can find this other video. It's a short documentary. It's about 12 minutes, but it is called Half-Life, and it is on Vimeo, and I'm giving you the website in the chat room. The website is vimeo.com/161080821. So there you can learn a little bit more about uranium and the story of America's last uranium mill. Thank you all for joining us tonight for our 71st episode. Thank all of the viewers who watch now and later. I want to thank Talia Boyd for joining us and giving so graciously of her time and experience. And of course, I want to thank our ancestors and all of our future ancestors out there who are with us no matter what. The association is grateful for your participation. Please go to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's see, any other announcements I have? Let's see. Oh, we'll be celebrating our 100th anniversary next year as the association. So be sure to check out our social media and other things for announcements and other things to come all year. Next year, we're going to be redesigning our website, and we'll be having some new programs. And I'm sure you're going to get to hear about all of those things. So until then, I guess we'll see you on the next Red Hoop Talk episode. And remember that you are sacred, and together we can all make a difference. See you next time.